So one thing I want to continue talking about on this topic of discovery as an important gameplay aspect. I feel like somebody could say, well, there are games that don't have discovery at all, but are considered to be objectively good games. First-person shooters come to mind. But I would say I disagree. So the most basic first-person shooters, your Call of Duty style games, Halo, all them, Battlefield. I think the discovery of those kinds of games is in how you play them, because it's not just it's not everybody in a line on an open field. There are, there's terrain and interactions and all this. So finding that you can get up to this one spot, I'm trying to think, I can't remember which Call of Duty it was. This was a long time ago, because it was back when Call of Duty wasn't set in the fucking future. And actually, no, it might have been a Battlefield game now that I think about it. I think it was a Battlefield game. And this was probably 10 years ago, maybe more. And I remember one of the things you could discover was on one of the maps, there was a very tall spire. I know it was Battlefield because there's helicopters and shit. And so what my go-to method, because it was something I discovered, you weren't meant to, you base gameplay, you weren't meant to get up there, and you had to pull off some bullshit to actually make it up there. But basically, long story short, was you get in a helicopter, flown by somebody else, jump out of the helicopter, pop your parachute, you could land on top of this spire that was literally like, it was so small that when you laid down prone, your character model hung off the edges ridiculously. But you could get up there, and you were so high up that it was the perfect sniper point. And the only person who could get you would be somebody else with a sniper rifle because you were so fucking high up. And that was something I discovered. I remember flying over, and I'm like, I wonder if I can jump on that. I'm sure I tried it. And so there is something to be discovered in games like that, even though they seem very flat. Because they're very straightforward. The gameplay is, again, so you look at a first-person shooter. What's the challenge? Beat the other team. Where's the freedom? Well, pick the class, pick the method, pick the route, pick the this, pick the that. There is lots of freedom. First-person shooters, I actually think, have probably some of the highest ratios of freedom to challenge out there, because they, by their very design, are designed to be fucking talking's hard, right? They're designed to be random, different every time. An online FPS game will never play 100% exactly the same each time, because there's going to be different people choosing different classes going different routes. So there's all that freedom, because it has to inherently be free, because the game is designed to be very variable. And so another one would be, so you look at Overwatch, different class-based shooters. Where's the discovery in that? Well, I say the discovery in that is, so you look at, I think this is actually why Overwatch is starting to wane a bit, is because the discovery is going away, because the maps in Overwatch are very restrictive. There's not a lot of places you can get to that you're not supposed to get to, or not supposed to be able to get to easily. And that's by design, because Blizzard designs their levels very tightly. And I think in some games they would say, this is a bug. Now it's a feature. Rocket jumping in TF2 was ostensibly a bug to begin with. It was just a weird circumstantial effect of, the way the physics of the game worked, with explosions and character models and, the actual player character versus other player characters. So the side effect of all of these interactions was rocket jumping. And it could have they could have gone, well, that's not the intended purpose of this, and fixed it somehow. But instead, Valve, back when they actually gave a shit, looked at it and said, that's fucking stupid, I love it. And they kept it in the game and actually built the game around it, to the point where you get things like the Market Gardener and the Man Shreds, and items that were designed around using this ostensible bug. And I think that's why a game like TF2 is remembered so much more fondly, and will be remembered so much more fondly than Overwatch, because Overwatch is to be made very sterile. And this goes back to my point of esports and assholes, where Overwatch takes itself too seriously. And because Overwatch takes itself so seriously, Blizzard, they fix all these potentially interesting things. And so they actually are removing the discovery. Because early in Overwatch, there were things to discover. I remember the first time somebody used a Graviton, there was a Graviton Blast or Graviton Surge in, what's Hanzo's fucking stupid alt called? The Dragon alt? I can't remember what it's called. But the first time you saw a Grav Dragon, somebody was like, oh, we just discovered something amazing. Because you realize that interaction, there was something to discover, the different interactions of different heroes' alts, right? First time somebody realized that Reinhardt's hammer, Reinhardt's Earth Shatter combined with something like Junkrat's Wheel, where you can incapacitate a large portion of people, larger than I think with Graviton Surge, and for just enough time to get in there with the big wheel and blow everybody up and kill everybody. First times people discovered what does and does not block D.Va's ultimate. So there were all these things to discover, but as things go on, there's less and less to discover, and so discovery is taking a very, very, very far back seat. And it's taking it to strict mechanical gameplay, which again, great for esports, but for your average consumer, fucking sucks. It makes the game boring. Now, how do they get around that? Well, they keep releasing new heroes. New heroes change the way the game plays. A new hero gets introduced, and all of a sudden, the quote-unquote meta completely changes. You introduce a hero like Bridget, and all of a sudden, the way all the other heroes that normally would compose what would be considered, the baseline good team, that changes because now you have this new hero that counters them. And so that's what Blizzard's doing to overcome this stagnation in discovery. They keep dropping in new heroes to make the game forcibly be rediscovered because the interactions change. Is that a good model? Yeah, sort of. It's functional at the very least, but I don't think it's sustainable because at a certain point, you're just going to run out of good ideas and then you're going to start dropping in stupid characters. Has it happened yet? A little bit, maybe. Ashe felt very unnecessary, especially from what she could have been. Bob was a fun mechanic. Bob as an alt is fun. Her bomb, also a good idea. It's the first dot in the game, which I think is a step in the right direction. Bob, I think, to go back to him, while fun, I also think was a stupid choice because Bob shifts the battle too much in one direction at a certain level of play. Almost to the point of where Torbjorn's turret used to be. Because the Torbjorn's turret was ostensibly player number 5.5. And if the turret was better at killing people than the people were at killing the turret, which you saw a lot at very low levels of gameplay, it gives the team a massive advantage to have a Torbjorn. And I think that's what you're seeing with Bob as well, is that if the people aren't as skilled and aren't as good at countering Bob, or how to handle him, he becomes much more overpowered by that nature. And so, again, they're thinking more of the esports side and the professional side, the high-end gameplay side, rather than the average player side. And I think that's, this kind of constant push to... And I think they're getting there because they're trying to turn out characters faster than they have time to test these ideas. And I'm talking like, pre-alpha testing. This is like them taking, a sandbox build of the game and then introducing in, wireframe basic models that have basic roughed-in abilities to see how that interaction works out. And it's also one of those things I don't think you can really do inherently because of how Overwatch is played. They could do that. They could, again, stripped down version of the game where the new character is introduced as an unskinned wireframe model, and they just want to see how it interacts before, and they may not even use it. I don't think they really... That kind of testing, I think, would help, and I don't think they're doing it. But I also think, to a certain degree, it wouldn't help entirely, because there is an aspect of the game that's just, when you put it in the hands of live players, you're going to get a whole different set of data. So I think, again, I'm getting long-winded and off track here, But again, the idea is that Overwatch is trying to they're trying to manufacture discovery on the fly, because the game didn't have much to discover to begin with. And it works, but only for so long. Now take a look at World of Warcraft. They've actually done the opposite. They said, fuck you, you're discovering nothing. And I think, so look at Legion, there was a bit of discovery. Artifacts, as you went, there were people, it was a while into Legion before somebody had unlocked everything. And then they added more shit to unlock, right? So there was, just the Legion artifact skill trees gave you shit to unlock and shit to discover. The problem was that discovery didn't lead to anything new, because rather than discover things and then make a choice, it's actually, there was so much freedom as to not have any freedom, because freedom means that you can make choices, but when there's no choices to make because you're going to unlock every aspect of the artifact weapon, then there isn't ostensibly no freedom. And I think that was where people started to get upset, where it's like, oh yeah, all these new artifact abilities to discover and to work with and play with, except there's no point of actually, you're not picking and choosing, so there's no freedom, you're just taking all of them. And then they kind of added that back in a really half-assed, half-hearted way with the Netherlight Crucible, because I think they realized that people do like these choices. But the problem was, I think the Netherlight Crucible was still perceived as, really lukewarm at best, because the choices didn't matter. I remember you're talking, it was like character, it was like, it's, the final tier choice of this is that whenever you fart, your character heals for half of 1% of their health. So it was such a the numbers were so minuscule because they were, I think, a little afraid of breaking the game, because I really got the impression that Netherlight Crucible was added in on the fly as kind of an answer to people saying, we like this, but we want choice. And so they added in this thing where the actual choices didn't fucking matter, but at least you still got to make a choice. I still think people enjoyed that aspect of it, that there was something to be chosen from. And I think they tried to recreate that with Azerite traits. But the problem is, as somebody pointed out, is that all Azerite traits, so if you're playing a Paladin that has a tanking, healing, and DPS spec, your Azerite traits in any given piece of gear are going to be 1 tanking, 1 DPS, 1 healing, and then maybe a 4th, just kind of generic, good for everything trait. So again, there is no choice, because you're always going to take the one that's specific to your spec, because that's going to be the best one. So again, no freedom of choice. There is no choices, because what they should have done is that they wanted to do it right. The Azerite gear would change based off of your spec, and then would give you 4 choices that were within that spec. So then it became much more of a talent tree style thing, where you were mixing and matching different combinations. The problem here is that would require a lot more development time and a lot more development creativity. And again, as I've said before, I really think that World of Warcraft right now is being run on a shoestring budget of just the bare minimum amount of people to keep the game functioning and turning out expansions. Not necessarily good expansions, just playable expansions. And so they don't really have the people or the manpower, because I think Activision Blizzard sees World of Warcraft as a dying brand, and they're not in it to get new players. They're in it to make as much money they're trying to slow and profit from the decline as much as possible, rather than just killing the game outright and saying no more expansions after this, World of Warcraft is done. Rather than doing that, they're trying to keep it profitable on the way down. But the way you do that is by reducing the amount of money you spend. So again, I think they're on a shoestring budget, and that's why a lot of parts of World of Warcraft feel unfinished, untested, and just very bland and boring, is because they simply the game itself is not being given or allotted enough resources in order to do so. Because again, Azerite traits, how do you fix them? Each piece of Azerite armor, the traits change based on your spec, and then now one of 4 choices becomes really one of 4 choices, because now your one piece of Azerite armor has 5 choices on the outside ring that are all different tanking things, and then the inside ring, and then you're actually mixing and matching and combining different abilities to get something new out of your game in the way that it's played, rather than just taking, of course, the obvious option A, which is it's really ironic in that sense, because that's what Azerite gear has become, and they got rid of the initial talent trees originally because they said, well, everybody takes the same shit, so why have all these different talents when everyone's taking the same ones overall? And now they've just done the same thing where everyone's taking the same Azerite traits because they're the best Azerite traits. The difference is that there's no real way, there's no mixing and matching in a creative way. There is no room for creativity and discovery. The original World of Warcraft talent trees had room for discovery. They had room for these weird one-off hybrid builds that maybe weren't effective, but motherfucker were they fun just based off the fact they were interesting. Again, I discovered, I didn't discover it, but I found on my own the Soul Link Siphon Life build for Warlocks back in Burning Crusade. I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know this was a thing people were doing. I was like, holy shit, I figured out how to make myself a god. That was what I figured out. And it was awesome. It was a natural result of me just playing with the talent trees, playing the character and staring at the screen and figuring out, wait a minute. And that's what the game lacks now because they keep removing these elements. And I think a lot of it is A, that they're trying to appeal to non-gamers, as I've said. And I think B, it's because I think they're at a point where I genuinely think they would love to add back these aspects of the game. But now the game is so developed and so far gone that in order to add these things back would require a lot of work. And that work isn't doable because the game's not being given the resources it needs in order to bring it back to its old glory. Because I think in the eyes of the overarching developer, that is Activision Blizzard, and the businessmen in charge of all that, it's not worth saving.